all kinds of horrific conditions in the factories, and they start to, that's the origin of liberalism. And then you have another class, that's the managers and people working for the industrial class, the ruling class, whose sympathies are with their leadership. And then you have the middle class that goes on to start utopian societies, eventually a communist party. And in the 1920s, you have Mussolini comes along because he's recruited by the ruling class who are fearing the rise of communism. And that's an authoritarian system, and they feel that they need a much more powerful authoritarian system to counter the rise of communism in Europe. So they initiate a prescription from Mussolini called fascism, which had to do with the corporations who are run by the ruling class, owned by the ruling class, in league with the government in order to stop communism from getting a foothold anywhere in the Western world. So that's where it really begins in the 1920s with Mussolini and the rise of Hitler, both of whom are Templars for the wealthy. The same with the Nazi Party and fascism throughout Europe. It was being financed and organized by the rich, and you had the same in the United States. You had fascists there as well as in Europe, and those fascists were working for the industrialists, Henry Ford, IT&T, the Rockefellers, the Bush family, and so forth. They're all investing in fascism, and we're stuck with it today. So that's really where it begins in the 1920s.
So
it's fascism that we're contending with, not so much the OSS and the CIA or the Nazis, right, or the military. It's fascism, which is, as Mussolini defined it, the corporations working in an unrestricted fashion to rule over our lives.
And I think for me, when we look at sort of, the warnings of where it looks like we're going, I know many, many years ago, I always kind of figured that the sort of Brave New World scenario was far more likely than the boot on the face of 1984. That they would get us, like Huxley said, to love our servitude.
Well, the Nazis devoted 40% of their efforts to propaganda. And propaganda is a form of mind control. They use the same techniques. So, we have a populace here who has their beliefs, and it's all illusion. It's what they believe is false.
But it does seem like they're prepping us for sort of another big kind of change or a big kind of event, in a way.
I think it's possible.
But perhaps that's just my own feeling that there's some sort of other shoe to drop. The next 9/11, I suppose.
We're in the midst of an orchestrated economic collapse right now.
Mm-hmm.
The bailout money is actually being thrown over the fence, from by the corporations to the corporations.
And they're not telling us, we're not allowed to know where it goes.
And as we don't understand this any better than we understood the SNLs, which was a vast CIA mafia operation. That wasn't reported in the daily newspapers, and the average person has no conception of what happened. But that was CIA and the mafia looting all these SNLs across the country, and that's how they operate. They've been doing this for a long time, and getting away with it because they have the press to cover for them. That's the only way they could get away, say, with the Kennedy assassination, and that's probably the best argument for the mafia didn't do it, didn't kill Kennedy, because they don't have the power to control the media.
And
the CIA has that power because they began in 1947 to do just that under something it was called Operation Mockingbird, and that was making connections between the CIA and magazines like Newsweek, Time Magazine, Reader's Digest, and all these corporations had already been doing the fascist propaganda under the aegis of the corporations, but then the CIA stepped up and made it an official intelligence function. So if you pick up, say, a copy of Reader's Digest, you're going to find, the average articles, but in every issue there's one or two articles that are planted by the CIA. And you'll find that in just about every major publication around the world.
Now, we had the recent death of Tom Braden, I believe was his name.
Braden.
Braden.
Was supposedly a leftist. He worked for the CIA. He had his start breaking up labor unions in Europe, and then he becomes a spokesman for the left, or the controlled left.
And that's what it seemed to me, is that in looking at it, he's credited of, the creator of Crossfire, which popularized the conservative versus the liberal. And in a way, it seemed that was his CIA gig, was to set up this sort of fake left-right dichotomy.
Right, and that's all the media does. I mean, you turn on television, what do you find? Programs on aliens, Fox News, which is a CIA operation. You can't get away from it. It's anywhere you turn in the major media, the CIA is there, and I can promise you that. Get on the internet, do the research, you'll find it.
Well, man, I really appreciate you taking this time. I know we've hit so many topics that I'd love to spend more time on, and hopefully at some point we could definitely do this again. Do you want to leave any parting words of warning or wisdom for the folks out there listening?
Basically, I say it's time for discipline. That American Idol is crap. What they're serving up in the media is just garbage, so tune it out. Even the politicians, don't listen to what they say, just watch what they do, and start digging in. That's all I have to say.
Well, and I think for me, I feel like the media is the one thing that they use against us that we can actually use back against them. Well, I can't, I can't beat them with the money, or I can't maybe beat them with the guns or military power, but we have media, and I'm talking to you through my computer right now, and in a short time, hopefully a lot of people are going to be able to hear this.
Well, it's let me give you a tip on what to look for. I was talking about planted stories. It's basically the whole thing. Most newspapers have real reporters. They go out and they gather real news stories, and some of those will be scandalous. They'll expose government scandals and so forth, although they try to keep that to a minimum. But it's the planted story you have to watch for. The front page story that finds WMDs in Iraq, right, that led us into the war. It's the planted stories you watch for. If you want legitimate information, it's there in the media to be culled, right? But you have to know who the propagandists are, and you get a good sense of this after a while, who to stay away from and where to find the legitimate information. And one place is Alex Constantine's Blacklist. That's the first blog, part of the primary blog that I operate. And you'll find that on the internet. Just do a search for Alex Constantine's Blacklist, and you're on your way.
And again, I'll include a lot of extra links and research for folks to get to your sites as well as your books. We, of course, only really mentioned The Covert War Against Rock, but you've got a few other books also in e-format as well, and articles. And there's, again, man, so many things we didn't talk about. NutraSweet or...
Yep.
So, again, I really appreciate it.
And as do I.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.